Hello, today we are going to talk about one of the most famous people in modern history, Napoleon Bonaparte or Bonaparte, not to be confused with amazing dancer and ninja skill extraordinaire Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon is someone who, like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Genghis Khan, he's known for his skills as a military genius, and he is able to make France the most dominant European country in only a few short years. At this point in time, France has gone through the ousting of the monarchy, and as you may recall from the last discussion, the moderates are now in control of the government, and we're looking at about towards the end of 1793. So today we will focus on the question of who was Napoleon, kind of towards the end of the final question here. And by the end of all of our discussions and presentations, you should be able to answer all of these questions, but today you should be able to get an idea of who Napoleon was. So now let's attempt to answer that question. Who was Napoleon? Napoleon was born on the small island of Corsica in 1769. It's an island off the coast of Italy. Napoleon is sent off to military school at a young age, and at the age of 16, he's able to become a lieutenant in the army. At a young age as well, he joins in on the French Revolution and as part of the National Assembly Army. Again, he has sympathy for the French revolutionists. The parts of the French Revolution that we talked about were from 1789 to 1793. Now, a few years later, the French are still fighting the war against the other European countries and also against its own royalist rebels who still want the return of the monarchy. Napoleon gains his fame by leading an army against the royalist rebels as he defends the National Convention, and when he successfully defeats them, he becomes a national hero. Think George Washington-like hero. He then leads the French army into battle against Italy, where he gains more victories, and also against Egypt, and he's now the biggest man in France. And did you know that although people think he was short, as he is listed as 5'2", that 5'2" is in French measurements, and converted to our measurements, he was actually 5'7", which still may be short, but back then, people were a lot shorter, so he was actually average height. The more you know. So, as Napoleon wins these battles, he hears about the power struggle between the moderates and other people in the government. He learns that the moderates are losing control, so Napoleon returns to France, takes control of the army, or with his army, the government, and this is known as the coup de grace. Then to solidify himself as a ruler, he earns key victories against the many European countries that they were fighting against, and through the wars and diplomacy, he finally ends the war for now. So as Napoleon is fighting these wars, the people hold what is called a plebiscite, or vote to make him the first consul. But Napoleon basically takes over as dictator. He wasn't the only consul, but he was the first one and becomes pretty much a dictator. The government under Napoleon keeps many of the revolutionary ideas and creates a better tax method, a national bank, removes corrupt officials, and sets up government-run public schools called lycées. With all of these things, Napoleon really does change the way things are in France, and the old regime is pretty much gone. He also separates the church from the state, but still works with the church on certain things. One of the biggest accomplishments that Napoleon felt that he had done was called the Napoleonic Code, which is a set of laws that were uniform, meaning universal, which means that they were the same laws for everyone. It didn't matter what class you came from, you still had to abide by these rules. However, many people felt that the Napoleonic Code was not successful because it limited some of the French Revolution ideas, such as restrictions to freedom of speech and bringing back slavery to the French colonies. But overall, though it did do these things, it did give order to the people. And to the right, you have a copy in French of the Napoleonic Code. And then in 1804, Napoleon becomes emperor, which, again, kind of goes back to how things were with a monarchy. It's a little bit different, but in a sense, it was almost the same thing. So as Napoleon is emperor, he then starts to go back to fighting. He restarts his fighting for France as he tries to go to Saint Dominique, which is in modern-day Dominican Republic, to recapture the island after it gained its independence when it revolted during the French Revolution. They basically saw what the French were doing and said, hey, we want the same thing, we want to be independent. But Napoleon tries to recapture them. However, after sending many troops and money there, he was unable to win and really gives up all the fighting in America and in the American territories, as he considers it too far and a waste of time. So he famously sells off territory in America, that's right, America, or America, as some may call it, and this is known as the Louisiana Purchase. After his failure in the Americas, Napoleon focuses back on Europe and claims territory in the Netherlands, parts of Italy, and then wins battles to gain territory in Austria, Spain, and Poland. This creates the largest empire in Europe since the Romans. Remember those Romans? They were pretty important and they had a huge empire. So Napoleon tried to create this huge empire and he did it in about 4 years, which is pretty impressive. But like all military conquerors, his ego gets in the way. His first major defeat is against the British Navy and Commander Horatio Nelson. He had other battles against Horatio and was able to defeat him, but this time on the sea and against that British Navy, he wasn't able to do so. Now, if you remember your U.S. history, the British are known for their amazing navy. So in reality, Napoleon had no chance. And of all the territories he conquered, he could never conquer the British. Here we see the extent of the Napoleonic Empire, and all the purple parts from Spain to Poland are territories of the French. Let me draw a circle for you. So pretty much all of this except for the Austrian Empire are all part of France. Again, this is the biggest empire in Europe since the Romans, so it was pretty impressive how Napoleon was able to rise out of the French Revolution with all the debt that was incurred and forge a huge empire in a short period of time. So now you should know a little bit about Napoleon and can answer the question, who was Napoleon? That question right here. Our next discussion, we will wrap up Napoleon and the French Revolution. Again, there are many more details to it. It was a complex revolution, but hopefully you have a general idea of who Napoleon was at this point, and again, the causes of the French Revolution and the ideas that were created for France.